Guess what, man? We're rolling. Hey, everybody. You are listening to A Chatter of Fact. Again, these are not interviews, folks. They're conversations. And you're in for a treat. You're listening to Mr. David Calzaretta, and this guy has built an empire. I want to say it, man. You're an empire builder, you know, and not like the Star Wars one where it's all evil. I mean, like in a good way, man. You've built an empire. You've built a kingdom, and I'm impressed every day and every year I get to work with you. You are perfectly in line with what needs to happen on this show, man. So, you know, I did that TED Talk way back when, and it was all about picking up what you learn and using it later on. I don't know if anybody has done that at such a high level more than you, more than anyone I know in life. Everything you've picked up, and we're going to touch on that, man. This is kind of like, if I had a theme for This Is Your Life, that's what this is going to be, dude.
All right.
Yeah. So, folks, that's what we're going with.
I'm just nervous about following Zara.
Yeah. Did you listen to hers? That was it.
Robbie. Listen, man.
It's a hard R and many R's. She puts like 5 R's in my name.
Yes.
That one gets downloaded so much just because I guess people just think she's a treat, you know.
She is.
I had to put her on twice. And she's one of the people. Oh, here's another thing. So, folks, you know, you guys hear the tales of me traveling the globe and all that good stuff. I'm traveling the globe often, most of the time, because of the gentleman you're going to listen to. You're going to hear a story about a guy that is into so many different styles of music, as a singer himself, but also a wise businessman who is able to do what most of us musician folks cannot do. You applied a business plan to the music, combined your love of singing with like your knowledge, and then you made something. This is huge. Dude. You don't think you're a big deal, but when this show's over, you're going to walk away like, hey, you know what? I'm a big deal. That's what's going to happen. So, first and foremost,
please text that to my wife and kids when they ask me to.
I will do that.
Take the garbage out tonight.
Well, the fans will do it, man. You're going to get Googled a lot after this, so it's pretty cool. Let's start with the basics, though. Some of the stuff I don't know. Like, where'd you grow up?
Grew up in Northbrook, Illinois.
No, really?
Northwest suburbs.
All right. My big question, man, is what was the first music you were listening to when you were a kid?
So I learned to use a phonograph when I was about, my mom says like a year old. Like I was putting records on the phonograph, and I would have one of the first things that I listened to over and over again, apparently, was Kate Smith's rendition of America the Beautiful or something like that. God Bless America, that's what it was.
Wow.
I don't know why.
Huh.
And then, you know, my early recollection, so my dad was a singer back in the 50s. He had a song on the charts called City of Angels in 1957 with his group The Highlights. He recorded for Bally Records. So my dad was a big fan of like the 50s doo-wop groups like the Letterman and the Four Aces and the Crew Cuts and things like that. That's who their group was similar to. So, you know, there was a lot of that being listened to. He
was really on the charts too, right? Like
he had number, I believe it got up to number 18 on Billboard in 1956 or 57, and then it was number 3 in Chicago, while a certain Mr. Elvis Presley had the number 1 and 2 songs, probably. I was a huge Elvis fan. I remember one of my first musical recollections was the night that he passed in 1977. I was at my grandparents' house, and I was pretty much inconsolable.
What? Now, I know you because of our shared Motown love. I didn't know the Elvis thing.
Yeah, I was a big Elvis fan.
How did that trickle into your brain?
You know, I think that my dad, it's funny because my dad was an amazing, amazing singer. And, you know, won his family a car when he was 12 years old at the Morris B. Sachs Amateur Hour and, you know, things like that. And then went on to become, you know, a professional singer for a while and stuff. But he never evolved out of the, you know, like it was almost like time stopped for him, and he was kind of like stuck in the 50s and never really got into the 60s and 70s and 80s until, you know, a little bit later in life. You know, like obviously we both share that we've lost a parent. You know, I lost my dad in January. In the last like 4 months, you know, he was going to dialysis 3 days a week, and I was in charge of filling up the iPad with, you know, this new crazy iTunes thing and this Apple Music. Like, what? I could get anything? How about this? And as he's saying it, I'm downloading it. I'm like, okay, we're done. He's like, that's it? I thought, he couldn't fathom how quickly that this could happen. But he almost like became locked in time with that. And my mom had some tapes and some records and things like that. So, I remember at a young age listening to like, some Simon and Garfunkel. Yeah. Joe DiMaggio became my favorite baseball player, though I never got to see him play because of Mrs. Robinson. And I would ask my dad, who's this, where have you gone, Joe DiMaggio guy? And, and my dad was an interesting guy because in 1983, the All-Star game was hosted at Comiskey Park at the old White Sox park. And there was an old-timers game the day before. And Joe D was... my dad took me because Joe D was on the roster, and I got to see him march out and get introduced, when I was, I would have been 9 years old at that point. He didn't play because he was too old, but just to, like, be able to stand up and cheer for him was pretty cool. Side note.
Man, I wonder how old he was at that time.
Yeah, he was probably pushing, he was probably born in 1919 or something like that. Jeez. So he was probably, 60. It might have been late 60s at that point. But yeah, I would just listen to different things. And my sister started getting into music, and she listened to like the Carpenters and...
Older? She's older than you?
She's 4 years older. Yeah. So she would listen to like the Carpenters and then, acts like Billy Joel, and she'd buy 45s. I remember, Centerfold by Jay Giles Band was a big thing. Everybody would say that. Na, 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 na. That was a big thing.
So then what did you find yourself, whenever you got into the singing thing, how old were you when that started for you?
Well, there's a delineation of when I knew I could sing and when I told people I could sing.
Because folks, not only does he run this fine company, but he's a lead singer for the flagship band Maggie Speaks of the company. So, yeah, all right, give me the when you thought you could sing.
Well, yeah, growing up around it, and my dad and my uncle were in the highlights together. Everybody in my all the males on the the paternal side of the family all sang, and I knew I could sing because I guess my blessing and my curse is having, like, I think it's called perfect relative pitch of, if you tell me the name of a song, I'll sing it in the key it was written, and if you don't, I'll be very internal. I won't say anything to you, but unless it's Nicole, then I will say Nicole.
So for the listeners who don't know you that well, he's totally lying, because I don't have perfect pitch. And if I'm with you, and I'm like, oh, the tune, da-da-da-da-da, and you look at me with a little bit of disdain.
I said I'd look at you. Yeah, I didn't say I would. I said I wouldn't say anything to you. Unless you're Nicole Garza, who is my stage wife. You're right. I will say something to her repeatedly.
I've heard
because I love you, Nick, if you're listening.
I've heard you sing the correct note seconds after. Yeah. Oh, man, it's something. So,
but I remember my sister taking putting the Carpenters record Top of the World on her phonograph and then hitting the play record on the standalone tape recorder to record herself singing it. And she's like, well, sing it with me. And I naturally gravitated towards the third above harmony as like a 4-year-old. Nobody ever taught me that, but I found it years later, and I listened to it, and I'm like, why am I singing the third above? I kind of just picked it out of the air. So I knew I could sing, and I knew that I could tell that I was in tune, because anytime anybody, I'd hear a song or sing it to myself, I would always sing it in the key it was written. And, but I was an athlete. I played tons of baseball and basketball, and it wasn't cool to be like, hey, I can sing at that age and stuff. That was like
I went through the same thing.
Which is sad that that's the way it was back then. And then in 8th grade, the boys basketball team said, hey, Calzaretta, we're trying out for the musical. I said, okay. And, I'll back up 2 years to when We Are the World came out. We had talked our music teacher into letting us re-record We Are the World and doing our own video of it and stuff. And I was supposed to I could do a really mean Willie Nelson. As God has shown us by turning stone to bread. And I was, so I was slated to do that part, except I got in a fight with some kid the day before, and I got suspended in the office, and I had to write the word fighting like 1,000 times as they were recording. That would have been my big debut.
That would have been your first recording experience.
I missed it.
Wow.
Missed it.
That's still a solid Willie Nelson. The good thing is now the show has given that Willie Nelson to the world who missed it many years ago.
Yes.
Well, we could do that.
So there was that. That was like my I missed my brush with fame then in the 6th grade at Shaboney Junior High or middle school, whatever they called it.
That's when it would have blown up for you, man.
I was going to be big in Japan. And, but then in 8th grade, we were doing the musical Grease, and I wound up getting one of the lead parts. I played Duty, not to be confused with the emoji on your phone.
No. Duty, though. Right.
Those Magic Changes.
Oh, nice.
And Rock and Roll Party Queen, and I think there was one other song.
Whoever that singer was from Sha-Na-Na in the movie, do you remember that guy?
Yes, his name Bowser. No, the other guy.
The guy was a tenor guy, though.
Yeah.
Those were great songs, though.
They were. Yeah. And it was funny because like at first I was like, I wanted to be Danny, I think. My friend Eugene Ash, who is down in Biloxi, Mississippi now, still performing, he got that role. But in thinking about it, like my voice hadn't changed yet, and so like the parts were too low for me anyway. And that was always a tough one because my voice started changing in the middle of the production. So that like from the time of auditions to the time of showtime, I started going through puberty.
And those are tenor songs.
Oh, yeah.
So that's going to mess with you.
Yeah. I mean, but it was fun. And I think, it was interesting because, I don't know, I've always had this like falsetto thing too, which obviously...
That's what I wanted to know because you have such a solid, strong, ridiculously high falsetto. When did that enter you? I had to work to, I'd say this about you and folks like, Eddie Kendricks and, Philip Bailey and stuff. Like there are people like me who learned to sing falsetto, and then there are falsetto singers. Like I'm a singer who can sing falsetto. You're a falsetto singer. That's who you sing it as if you're singing in your natural voice,
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely gravitate towards that if I started singing. It's like if you
as a kid right away.
Yeah, I think a couple things. Like I really tried to hone the craft, so to speak, when I was in 8th grade. I was watching, Temps and Tops on HBO, the documentary that, we both were kind of introduced to that music with. And, Eddie Kendrick, for whatever reason, stood out to me. And so, like, in thinking about it, I was like, yeah, that's probably where it started. But then, rewinding, I remember, like, in 6th grade, I was dating. I'm using air quotes right now for those that can't see us on the podcast, which is only Robert over here. I was dating a girl named Allison, and Whitney Houston's first album had just come out. And I remember like our two songs were Saving All My Love for You and Baby You Give Good Love. And I remember like it was like a novelty thing on the bus that I was, baby, you can, and like, why could I do that? I don't know, so like, I guess I just was something that I never really worked on. I don't know why it came, but it wasn't a conscious thing. It just, when I opened my mouth, that was what would come out.
This is why we're friends, man. Nobody ever talks about You Give Good Love. Nobody talks about that song. They kind of jump ahead to Saving All My Love, and they kind of move forward from there. It was You Give Good Love that knocked me out. Yeah. I never heard anyone sing like that. You're the only person in my life in the last like 30 years that has referenced that song.
That is a great song.
That's a great song. The way she closes that thing out at the end when she just opens it up and she waits, you singers out there, she totally waits for her moment and bam! This is why we're friends.
So can we pause and can we have a thing in this that when we pick up a nugget, we could stop and just give people some advice?
Yeah, absolutely. What do you got?
Pause
now, before I want to make sure you guys are aware of this. You're when he says advice, you're getting advice from a person who has produced shows around the world, and I don't mean he wasn't flown to Jersey to do Jack's Rib House. This guy. I went to China and Rome doing major, $1 million productions with this gentleman. So you're getting real life production advice from a person who knows it maybe better than anyone else, So there you go. I just wanted to.
So here is like if you're reading the book, this is the footnote at the bottom, like the citation. As Robbie just said, she saved it for the end. So for all you young singers out there, my biggest advice, taking a pause for that is that, this is the American Idol generation and The Voice and shows like that where, the judges are like, you didn't do enough runs, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. And I think the most effective singers are the ones that stay in the pocket and stay in their lane. And if you have that muscle to go off and open up, it's great, but it's more compelling if you do it twice a show as opposed to doing it twice before the first chorus of the first song and continuing to do that all night. So that's our first advice to young singers out there is runs don't make a career and stuff, but used in the right spots, they can be compelling. Used over and over desensitizes people.
And maybe is this happening to the younger singers because they're just watching the American Idol thing, or they're watching The Voice where that singer has only one song, one shot, and then they come into our world where, hey, we're doing a 2-hour show right now, so you don't have to sing like you have that one shot to do every trick in the book. I wonder if that mentally they're watching the TV thing, and they get to our world where we're doing a 2-hour concert or longer. And they're just thinking one song, every trick is that. I wonder.
I mean, I think it definitely comes from there that if you've got a minute and 15 seconds to impress people, you're going to pull out all your bag of tricks. I think some of it's that. Some of it, I think, even rewinds to when Whitney and Patti LaBelle and Celine Dion and Chaka Khan were all doing Divas Live and stuff like that, where it was like, it was like a battle of the belters at that point, like, oh, you're going to go here, I'm going to go there, and let's outdo each other. And so I think that mentality, probably contributed to that a little bit. And then, just watching the judging on those shows, where, I remember Randy Jackson, on American Idol always commenting on not enough runs. It's like,
Really?
Hey, before that's what they called them, you didn't want the runs. You know what I mean? So, not to say that you shouldn't do it, but just use restraint.
Yeah.
Because, like anything, it's really compelling if it's every so often. And
placement within the song. You're right, man. Not before the chorus. Save it for the end, like a climax of a good movie.
Yes.
Open it up in the song.
So now we can push play again and go back to our regular conversation. And hopefully, we've touched some young performers out there.
Well, you had the falsetto thing, and I, I'm really curious about. I want to race through stylistically what you ended up loving, because you ended up loving a little bit of everything.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my first and foremost love was the Temptations and Motown music and, anything, almost all things Motown.
Did that changed my life? So folks, was that HBO or something?
HBO. Stevie Wonder hosted. First half hour was the Four Tops. The second half hour was the Temptations.
Did that music was around me because of my dad and mom, but that show changed everything for me. Did that really get you in? That
was my introduction. Like, I was not exposed to it prior to that, and that was my introduction. And my dad had a very unique way, he was an amazing dad, and what he would always do was whatever I took an interest in, he would research and make himself an expert in. And so, from there, I said, Dad, I really love the music. And I don't know if you were the same watching the documentary, but you'd start to see the original five of David Ruffin. And I remember listening to Paul Williams sing For Once in My Life and on there. And then it flashes, Paul Williams, 1940, whatever, to 1973. I'm like, no, he's dead. This is the first time I'm seeing it. And I'm like, I love that guy. And, it just caused me to do a lot of research on the group. My dad wound up finding out when they were going to be at Poplar Creek in Hoffman Estates, an old concert venue that is no longer there. And he took me to the concert, and I just was, floored with just watching it and all the choreography and the harmonies. And
Ollie
everything.
Woodson in that?
That was Dennis's last concert
Okay.
tour with them right after the I Wonder Who She's Seeing Now album. It might have been called, I think that was the song. I can't remember if that's the name of the album. But that was, the last time he was touring with them. And then, so I'd kind of, I'm just kind of mesmerized at the concert, and I see all these people up there singing My Girl with them, which I think is a good transition into our
Well, real quick, though,
but
you and I got very lucky. Wouldn't you say? Because when we watched the documentary, it focused on the original, and the original group was just so awesome. They were so badass. But then around the time you and I probably both fell into the Temps during that kind of later 80s or whatever it was the first time in a while that they rekindled a strong lineup because of Ollie Woodson. So when you and I kind of got into going to see them live, we got really lucky that they had this singer, the lead singer who just...
For sure. I think for me, like the first time I saw him was with Dennis, and then the second time that I went, this is what, 1988, 89, and it wasn't like we've got our phones and it, like to go get information. I remember in 8th grade there was no internet. You had to go use like a LexisNexis and NARS system. It was called where you would it was like a computer card catalog where you check out like actual floppy disks that would have information on. Or you'd have to hunt through magazines or encyclopedias and stuff. So, I remember going to the second concert and just fully being prepared for Dennis Edwards, who was an amazing vocalist. And all of a sudden, 4 guys come out, and then there's Ollie Woodson. I'm like, what the heck is he doing here? Because he was in the group. Then Dennis came back, and then Ollie replaced him again. So it was, very much surprising to see Ollie back. And then he was, just one of my temptations, as I would say.
And you and I got lucky because we got into a group, and when we were going to see them live, and we didn't know each other at this time. So we were living these parallel lives, folks. But we weren't seeing like an old broken down oldies group.
For sure.
We were seeing those guys were great at that time.
Well, and I think Ollie added so much to the group because he wrote, Treat Her Like a Lady, and and that was a big hit for them, and they were still it breathed some new life into them. It was also at a period when they were making some appearances on television shows. They were on Moonlighting, if you remember Moonlighting with Bruce Willis. And
somewhere on a VHS tape, I have a Fall Guy appearance.
Yes.
Did you remember that one?
Yeah. They were, and then, they would, Arsenio Hall was great for them because he was such a fan, and he would bring them out. And, so they were starting to kind of resurface and make their rounds. And, I wouldn't even say resurface, but I just think that, They were writing some, or not that they were all writing it, but they were recording some relevant music again that wasn't, just like, hey, we got to come out with a new album that we can use as a drink coaster so we can keep touring. So.
Actual hits happened again. I think Sail Away was like an R&B hit. Now, that was the first thing I heard from the new camp that wowed me.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute.
That and Lady Soul. And
Oh, Lady Soul was so good. Yes. See, we're almost going to have a separate episode where we just talk Temps. That's what we're going to do.
It's going to be like a 3-hour episode where... It'll be great for the listeners. We'll just name songs that you don't know. And I'll just say Soul to Soul, and Robbie will go, yeah. And then Robbie will say Love Line, and I'm like, And we'll do that for 3 hours.
You guys are going to love it.
Yeah, and you'll want to give yourself an emergency tracheotomy with a steak knife as an alternative.
Or they're going to Google good stuff. You never know.
One of the two.
Yeah, one of the two is going to happen. Well, yeah, I want to get back to you because what I'm fascinated by and the stuff I don't know of is, let's just assume that from that point on you became an eclectic guy musically, But I want to get into once education got into the game, like when you were in high school, let's say junior, senior year, when we all have to start deciding what we're going to do, were you aware of what you wanted to be? Was sports kind of calling your name? Your dad and I, you may not know, but we'd always have a few moments every time I saw him because I loved him so much. And one of the first times we ever chatted, he really talked up your baseball playing and stuff. So I didn't know, but what were the aspirations, the realistic aspirations when you were like junior, senior in high school?
Yeah, well, I mean, rewinding a bit, I always wanted to be a professional athlete, but I capped out at 5'11". And, I played baseball, I played basketball, and when I did the musical, like, that was a very big, like, musical coming out party of people.
What year was that?
That was eighth grade, and that was 1988, and people were like, whoa, like, I didn't know you had that gear in you, or, that surprised me. The result of it was I found that at that age, it was the right age where, like, all of a sudden, like, girls were, like, interested, and that, like, not so much like, oh, you made that shot the other day or the free throw, and now it's like, wow, you could sing like nobody else can do. So that was intriguing to me. And it was funny because all the high school choral teachers and drama teachers would come to the junior high musicals to see what's the farm system going to bring up and stuff. And so I was getting a lot of pressure to join like chorus and show choir, and I resisted all of it. And I did it for the better good of humanity, because I would hate like when the high school assemblies would come to our junior high, and I was so into Motown music, and I'd have to listen to them butcher, their, do you love me? Do you love? And I'm like, no, that's not how you sing that song. And I was like, I never wanted to subject anybody to having to listen to a bunch of Northbrook kids trying to sing a Contours song.
Yeah, it's weird because nothing against that like art form, because it taught them music, it taught them sound, but they almost should have just strayed away from those songs, or they should have brought someone in to say, listen, if you're going to do this, Yes. I've heard the same thing done to rock tunes.
Exist in Northbrook, though.
But, all right,
anyway, long and short of it is I rebuffed all the efforts, but what I did do was I met up with a bunch of guys, and we formed a rock band, and so, freshman year we had, two drummers. Well, so we had a guitar player, two singers, a keyboard player, and we had two drummers because nobody played bass. So we would rent a bass, and I would, by ear, because of my pitch, I would pick out the bass parts and show them to one of the two drummers to play bass for us. And then, that went on for a little bit, and I was like, wait a minute. If I'm playing these parts and teaching them, why don't I just play the bass? So I became a singing bass player, which, as you were saying, with sometimes there's falsetto singers and then there's singers that sing falsetto. I was a singer that played bass, not a bass player that sang.
How hard was that to pick up, though?
I think it was by necessity that, like, for me, like now I'm fortunate enough to play with Sean Summer, who blows my mind every night and, leaves me in the dust. But I was good enough to play in any, rock band or club band and stuff like that. I was a very, I didn't go outside my lane because, I definitely couldn't control the car outside my lane. But it wasn't an option to, like when you're the singer and somebody puts the bass in your hand, you have to figure out how to play both. When you're just a bass player and then they say, oh, figure out how to sing. It wasn't that hard for me, only in the sense that, like, I just didn't know any other way. Like, I had to sing, so whatever I was doing on the bass had to fit in and stuff. Cool. I don't know. I made that happen, and then, all through high school I was in different bands, and we would perform at the Just Say No rally in the Village Park, or, after finals they'd have something called Gym Jam, where they'd have, like, 3 gyms going at our high school, and if you had a band, you could record a demo tape and get a hour slot.
What year did the band start? Did you start?
I started in bands in like 1989. Okay. So I graduated high school in 92, and I played with various different guys in my high school all through that.
Oh, okay.
But I never really set out to like, hey, I want to be a musician. To my knowledge, although, and I'll get to that, then I went on to Indiana University and I majored in accounting at Kelly School of Business. And
were you playing bass or jamming or doing anything musical in college?
So like I was in a fraternity, so I was always our IU Sing was a big thing where we'd pair with a sorority and put on like a 7-minute musical, and it was a big competition. So I was an IU Sing leader.
So we know that there's a love there and that's happening, but you're we'll call it for now, before you knew any better, the realistic brain. When you're in college, where did you want it? What was the plan career-wise?
Well, so the plan career-wise, originally, I just didn't know what I wanted to do. I selected Indiana University because in 1987, Keith Smart hit a shot over Ronnie Cycli to win the national championship. And people are like, oh, so I went to Indiana because of that.
That's how they recruited
you. And they're like,
you.
oh, you play basketball there? I'm like, no, I watch basketball there, and it's really fun. So, Indiana was far enough away, close enough that I could come home whenever I wanted, and far enough away that my parents wouldn't show up unexpectedly.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the goal with that. A beautiful campus. I fell in love with it. And, I went in there and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't think you had to declare anything till junior year. I've got this guidance counselor that's, very funny Asian lady. She said, oh, what do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. I thought I didn't have to decide. And she looked at my SAT scores and, like in typical me format, like I'm off the charts on math. I got like a 710 out of 800 on the math, and I barely qualify as English as a second language on the verbal part. I think I got like a 470 out of 800. And she looks at it, she goes, oh. And she goes, you'd be a good doctor. And I said, great.
Ooh.
I was like, doctors make a lot. I mean, I'm 18 years old. I'm like, doctors make good money. I'll do that. Doctor sounds good. So I'm signed up for 5 hours of advanced chemistry and 5 hours of advanced calculus that met at 8 a.m. every morning. And I think I had like a Saturday lab. And I'm like, I'm waking up and like, I was like, I can't do this anymore after one semester. And I looked at where my credits would transfer, and they would all transfer well into business. Mm-hmm. And I had a mom, my mom is still alive, obviously. So my mom was always very much, my roommate was an anthropology major, and she's like, what's he going to do with that? Dig up bones to be practical. Do something that you could get a job in. So I was like, okay, well, an accountant, I guess. Or like, I went into business school, and then I had to pick a discipline. So I did that. And I'm really glad that I did, like as a business owner now in multiple disciplines, whether it's, producing events, running bands, or real estate. I use more accounting now, and that's a taught skill. Not like, you can naturally know how to perform and sing. You can have that but like you don't wake up and go, I know how to do debits and credits and expenses and income and all, like all those technical accounting things. That's a taught skill. And if you have that combined with some natural ability, that's where some magic can happen. And so that was kind of the path, but not passionately. It was more just like I kind of fell into it like, well, this seems practical. And it was funny because like I would say a couple years ago, I dug up a box in my basement and I found my senior year high school newspaper, and it had like a section of like, what do we think where were we gonna be at in 10 years or 15 years or whatever. And I didn't remember anything about what I wrote. I'm reading like, I'm C in the alphabet, right? So I'm reading A, B, my friend Scott Barbakoff, this, and I get to mine, and it says, it literally starts with, I don't know, period. Probably playing in a band someplace and running my own businesses.
No way.
And I'm like, maybe I'm Kreskin. I don't know. Like maybe
you gotta be kidding me.
I literally like I sat there and looked at it for like 10 minutes. I'm like, I said that? How did I know? So
wow. So, but then at some point, though...
But it's also proof. Let's hit pause. Yeah. Here's your advice, kids.
Yeah.
If you write something down, it's more likely to happen than if you just keep it as a thought.
I just realized that you would have made a fortune with a fortune cookie company. You could have gone either way.
I've done that in college,
too. Okay.
That's a separate
So,
story.
We're getting out of college. Now, what's going on? It's the end of senior year. When do you kind of have a hint? Did you have a night, like how long did it take to line up a job after college?
I had a job going into my, fortunately, Indiana was a very highly recruited business school. So I interned as a public accountant auditor for KPMG back when the Big Six was in effect and stuff. So I had offers from Price Waterhouse and Arthur Andersen and Ernst & Young, and I wound up interning for KPMG, and at the end of my internship, they gave me a formal job offer for after I graduated. Also had one from Price Waterhouse. So I went into my senior year with a very stable job offer, and I thought for sure I'd go back to KPMG, and kind of late in the game, General Mills from Minneapolis of Cheerios fame and Wheaties and Betty Crocker and Yoplait yogurt and Chex
That's where
Mix.
you ended up at General Mills.
Yeah, they came in late in the game, and they flew me up to Minneapolis, flew my girlfriend at the time up there. We were sitting courtside at the Timberwolves game, right across from like Prince and Jimmy Jam and stuff. And
this
Kirby
is when you're a
Puckett.
senior in college they did this?
Yeah, and steak dinners and stuff, and touting like General Mills was a much public accounting. You kind of sold your soul, and we're working 80, 100-hour weeks during audit season and stuff. And General Mills was very well paying at the time, and it was, you worked hard, but there weren't the expectations to be there much longer than 40 hours a week and stuff. So I on a whim, I was like, okay, I'll try this out. And I moved to Minneapolis.
Let me ask you this. After college, before starting that job, did you give yourself some downtime, or did you kind of jump right in? What was the...
Yeah, I mean, I took my job started in August, and so I had from, the end of May till August.
Nice.
And I took a trip with my friends, my high school friends, across the cross country. We drove from Chicago to New Mexico, then up to LA, then to San Francisco, and back home. And we were on our way back home and hadn't seen my girlfriend for a long time. And I was like, I'll be home in a few hours. And as I called her from a payphone at a gas station, and then went in to pay for the gas, and the guy in front of me says to the guy at the checkout, and he says, I'm on my way to the concert. I'm like, what concert are you going to see? He's like, Styx. And I said, where are they playing? They're like, 2 miles from here. I'm like, okay. I go back, I call my girlfriend, and I go, I'll see you tomorrow. She goes, I thought you were coming home. I'm like, I got something I got to do in Iowa. And I go back to my friend, I'm like, we're not going home. He's like, what? I'm like, we're going to Styx. And we wound up 8th row center because, you buy a seat after they throw it. Let's hit pause. Here's your next.
What do you got?
If you're buying concert tickets, buy them on the last day, because they throw in all the house strikes that if Styx says I need 100 tickets in the first section, and they only needed 70 of them, those 30 are going back into the mix late in the game.
So like the day of the concert?
Day of.
Wow.
After the house gets, all the seats that they've withheld to give to VIPs or whatever, where they find out, like, well, we held 150 of them, we only needed 60 of them. There's 90 seats that nobody knew about back in the...
See, he wasn't kidding when he said nuggets. That's a nugget. That's a nugget there.
I have sat very close for very many artists using that technique.
Wow. Right.
Now, it might be a little different these days with ticket brokers being hip to that, and depending on how hot the concert is. But you should try it on a concert that you don't really care
whether you make it or not.
Yeah. If you're not going to be a complete person, if you don't see Paul McCartney, I don't suggest trying it on that one. But, if I don't know, Bob Seger comes around. I could go
Folks,
either way.
At this time, I think you should pause the podcast and get a pen and paper out, because you just start writing this stuff down. So then the job starts at General Mills.
Yep.
And how'd that go for you?
It was interesting. I was, at the same time I was studying for the CPA exam, I was I always joke and say I was one of the smartest people to pass the CPA exam in my start class, because, you had to pass 4 parts. You had to pass at least 2 to be able to, you could condition it. You could take it multiple times. But I was like, if I'm doing this, I got to pass all 4 at once. And, so I studied I had a very disciplined regimen. I would study Monday through Friday, come home from work and study from 7 to 10, Monday through Thursday. I would take Fridays off religiously and not study. And then Saturdays and Sundays, I would study from, like noon to 4. And I just did that religiously, for 4 months leading up to the exam. And you needed a 75 or better on each section of the test to pass it. And I was talking, once we got our results back, I was talking to all the people in my start class. I'm like, what'd you get? And they were like, well, I got a 95, a 96, a 94, 93. And I'm like, man, you guys, I got you all. And they're like, what did you get? And I'm like, 75, 76, 77, and an 80. I'm like, you studied too hard. I still had a life during the whole time. So I always joked that I was smarter than them because, they went into like their bat cave and studied and didn't have a life for 4 months.
You knew the baseline.
I knew where I had to be, and I knew what I had to do to get there. And, but I also knew that balance was important, which I completely forgot later in life about balance.
We all do till much later.
But at that point, I knew about balance in life. So, yeah, I mean, in the job itself, I was doing really well and getting good performance reviews, but I had this saying that to myself, like General Mills was just too big for me. I didn't realize I was a small business guy because I started to say, like, whether I show up or not, General Mills is going to make a ton of Cheerios today. And I never felt like I could wrap my hands around the whole thing. Like I was like, man, to really control this and to feel like I have a say, I would need to be like the CEO or the CFO. I'm like, that's a long way away. And I like the people that I work with, but I think in life, like one of the ways to find out if you're passionate about something is like if you don't know the answer to something, if you have an undying quest to seek out the answer, then you're passionate about it. If you're just like, just tell me because I don't care, then you don't have the So if I got stuck on something that I was working on at work at General Mills, like an inventory analysis or something like that, I was like, just tell me what I got to do. Like, I don't care to go into the rabbit hole. But when it's something that you're passionate about, whether it's like figuring out how we could start all these bands and stuff like that, where it was like you're in the salt mines, but you don't realize it because you're having fun, because you're seeking knowledge of something that you're really passionate about. I think that's a really big telltale sign in life that you're in the right lane and in the right place.
It's good that you didn't let it just eat you alive, though, because some people just let that eat them alive and they don't look to see whether there's a possible path. Not that there's always a possible path that's going to lead you to both, a fiscal reward and a passionate reward, but the fact that you knew to investigate it.
Yeah, I mean, I came home, I literally left the company after 1 year. My lease was up, and I just told them, hey, guys, I don't think this is for me. At first I
Without anything on the horizon, you left?
No, I mean, I started interviewing kind of under the radar, and I had an offer from a company in Chicago to do intellectual property financial consulting, like trademark and patent infringement cases and things like that, to be the financial expert in those. And so I had another offer to move back home. So at first I'm thinking, well, maybe I just don't like Minneapolis. And then I moved home and, started working at IPC Group. And then I realized I just don't think I like being in a cubicle. Like I could execute all the tasks I was given, but I never could commit to the number of I do this big analysis and it says, 23 at the bottom. And what does 23 mean? And I don't know. I plugged it into this and that. Like I knew how to do it, but I never really felt like I had that second layer of being passionate about being able to explain, what are the repercussions of 23 or what, coming out at the bottom of all this complex spreadsheet and everything. And I had started at the time, I'd moved back to, so I played in a band in Minneapolis. I answered an ad in the paper, and we did 2 gigs my whole time there. It was just a small side thing, nothing exciting. And then when I moved home, I was looking in the Illinois Entertainer or the Chicago Reader, and there was an ad that said, hey, 2 brothers, one playing drums, one's a singing guitarist / keyboardist, looking for singing bassists possibly to jam and form a band. So I called, and we agreed to meet up, and it was at an apartment right around the corner from the Wiener Circle on, Clark and Wrightwood.
Lincoln Park down there?
Yeah. And we played together, and we were like, hey, this seems pretty good. And so we, we started thinking about, like, okay, what are we going to call ourselves? So I don't know if we're ready for this, but are we ready to get into all this and stuff? Yeah. And at the time, this is 1997, and I'm 23 years old, so I'm a huge Simpsons fan and a huge, so it came down to, like, I was a Simpsons fan and a South Park fan, and it came down to, like, well, we could be Maggie Speaks, the little baby that never talks, or we could be They Killed Kenny, which fortunately, we chose Maggie Speaks,
which was able to transcend in time
with
and
the
be
amount
corporate.
of corporate work that we do, as opposed to, like, They Killed Kenny playing a bunch of Jackson 5 tunes. Sounds like a power punk, like, death metal, like
a Fortune 500 company might not be hiring They Killed Kenny.
They might not.
They might not.
They might not.
You guys, Kenny.
Let's go with the band with the word "killed" in it. That's what we need for our corporate party.
It's frowned upon.
Okay, so Maggie Speaks wins.
Maggie Speaks wins. We wind up getting another guitar player. It was really funny because I was, we were a trio at the time of, like, we have this drummer and this guy that plays acoustic guitar and keyboards, and then I played bass, and he and I both sang, well together. And we were like, okay, we need an electric guitarist. And it was funny because I was telling them about a kid I played with in high school that went to Maine East, a different, and he's actually a musician in the scene still. His name was Zoe Smolowitz. He plays with one of Ken Arlen's bands and stuff. And Zoe was, like, had the best, like, pitch that I've ever heard. Like, if you told him, he was one of those instantaneous, like, if you said, have you ever played Hotel California? No, I've never played it. But he knew it. He could immediately translate it to the fretboard, like, all through high school and stuff.
I've worked with that dude. That dude's amazing.
Yeah, he's pretty crazy. And it was funny because I hadn't talked to him in, 6-7 years, didn't know anything. And, I was telling Bob, our guy in the band, I'm like, I knew this guy Zoe Smolowitz. I wonder if I could figure out how to get a hold of him and stuff, because we went to different high schools, but we somehow got linked up to play together. Bob calls me a week later because we had an ad in the paper. He goes, I got one thing to say to you. I said, what? He goes, Zoe Smolowitz. And I was like, what? He's like, he called me. And he responded to the ad to Bob, like, without me prompting. And I was like, all right, this is crazy. So, he winds up joining the band and stuff. We record a demo at my good friend Kevin Connor's house, that is the leader of the band Ara, that does all the Journey Boston stuff. Kevin had a studio at the time and was gracious enough to help us record our first demo. And I literally, so we all had day jobs. Bob was an engineer. Bijan, the drummer, worked at the bank at LaSalle Bank in finance and stuff. And, I'm working as an intellectual property consultant. And so we need somebody to answer the phone for, whose phone number goes on this CD. Yeah. We literally flipped a coin. I'm not sure if I won or lost, in the sense that whatever happened, my name and number went on the bottom of it. So I became the booking guy. And it was literally like, we flipped a coin, because I was like, I don't have my number on there. And Bob's like, I don't have time for this. And Bijan's like, I don't have time for it. And so we drew straws for it, and I got the short straw. So I became the business guy of the band. So, serendipitous, right? That winds up, I remember our very first gig was, the first gig that I booked was at a place called Hoghead McDonough's, which was in the DePaul area. I think it was on Fullerton or Webster or something right by DePaul. And I had, in my head, the guy's name was John Mendoza that booked the club. And so I had thought about and rehearsed and talked out loud and talked with my dad. I'm like, okay, I'm going to make this call tomorrow. I'm going to try and get a gig. And so we worked out the scenarios. I was going to say, this is Dave Calzaretta. I have this band, Maggie Speaks. We've got people, young we had this whole thing planned out about why we were the right fit. And I called, I actually probably called from work just because it's way more fun than doing regression analysis. And I called, and he's like, Mendoza. I said, hi, John, my name is Dave Calzaretta. I have this band, Maggie Speaks. How many people can you draw? Well, so we're really good. I don't care. How many people can you draw? And I'm like, well, we could probably bring like 120 people with all the people in our office. Good. Your next gig is, 2 weeks from now, you're opening for a band called Junk Mail. I'll pay you $100. Okay. I'm like, so those hours of practicing my speech were all for naught when I just needed to know 120.
Wow.
So we wound up, going and playing. And then, our first gig was at the Lions Brewing Company, which I'm using my air quotes again, burned down 2 weeks later in what I like to call Greek remodeling.
Of course.
And which the funny story about it was that the PA system in there was like from DJ's Music in Berwyn. And they got a call a week before. And they said, you should probably come and get your PA out of here. And they're like, what's going on? And they're like, I can't really say much more than you should come get your PA out of here. So we wind up, Kevin Connor from Ara got us an opening slot. It paid $100. We had like 6 guys in the band. We divided the money up. We had $13 a piece or something like that at the end of the night, or probably 14. You could maybe buy a burrito and a Coke and have a little gas money left over to get you home. And that was like our first show back in June 18th or something of 1998.
The beginning of Maggie Speaks.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was very eclectic because, at that point, we weren't playing what we thought people wanted. We were playing what we wanted. So it was everything from, I liked singing Jackson 5 stuff, and we were playing, Running on Empty by Jackson Browne and an Allman Brothers tune and a Fish tune and Steely Dan and then a random Prince song. There was no continuity.
But people weren't so eclectic back then. I mean, it's serving you now,
Yeah, for sure.
But how did it go over back then?
Well, it was interesting because at the beginning, the crowd was all our friends, so they're like, when do we get to see this band that you keep talking about that you're playing? And so it was it was a very forgiving audience, and that they weren't sitting there keeping score about what you were judging. It was all, all your friends from work and college and high school that would come out and support you because that was their social life too.
So the first few years of Maggie Speaks, are you kind of figuring out how to appease every crowd now all of a sudden? Is that when that, that thought process?
I don't even think it
how much is it
factored
changing
into
from
that.
what you wanted to do to...
Yeah, I mean, I think that the beginning, because the goal was just to, the goal was literally to get some free beer and meet
fun.
Some girls and stuff like that, and, have a social life with it. It's very much easier to meet people when you walk off. We've talked about this before. When you walk off the stage after singing,
right, people
come up to you as opposed to you being the creepy person at the bar going, okay, what should I say?
Buy you a drink?
Yeah. Come here often.
We both needed singing because I think you and I probably shared the ability to not have the ability to really have much game when we just walk into a bar. I couldn't just walk into a bar.
And I blame every other guy for that because every other guy is, they're jerky and they come in and they're like Vegas guys, right? High five, Super Bowl up, and I'm going to pick up this, And so they've, girls are guarded and defensive. Like if you approach
nice guys like us wouldn't stand a chance. We'd be branded before.
Yeah, if you approach,
I never thought about
no, they're coming.
Yeah,
and so there's what are you going to do to break down that fourth wall? And it's I got nothing.
Interesting perspective. I never thought about that.
So all those guys ruined it, and so therefore we became musicians and we circumvented them.
Soften.
Although it was always fun to see, my wife now, I had taught her a funny line. when we were dating, she was doing we were doing a gig at the yacht club, the Race to Mackinac Island, and this guy was hitting on her in the crowd and stuff, and he just wouldn't let up. And she's like, "Look, I don't want you to waste your time. Like, I'm the singer in the band is my boyfriend and stuff." And he goes, "Well, I'm a musician too, And she goes, "You must not be very good." And he's like, "What?" She goes, "You mustn't be very good." She goes, "Well, why would you say that?" She goes, "Because it's Saturday night and you don't have a gig."
Oh, God.
He walked away a little dejected.
I've noticed, luckily enough, typically those dudes, have you noticed when they hit on your woman, your girl, when you're on stage, and once they find out that she's dating you or she's married to you, then suddenly they become fans, because they like, most of the time anyway, when Janice is like, "Well, that's my boyfriend," then it switches from, "Oh yeah, this is great, these guys are great."
Well, I would always find that, because here's where we started to transition. As we started to watch the crowd, we would see more and more females come out and stuff, and so we would start playing songs to cater to them, because that was who was our fan base. So you'd get these guys that would come out that'd be like, "Oh, stupid girl music," blah, 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 and they'd be grumpy if they weren't like getting any attention that night, but they would still come out because there'd be a lot of girls there. And so then the next time, if they did meet somebody, you'd see the same guy that was flicking you off the last week, calling you a sissy for playing girly music. The next week, he's like, "I love you guys, man. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm going out to breakfast with her tomorrow." And it was very Jekyll and Hyde-ish and stuff.
That works.
But and that's kind of where we started to transition, when we'd start to see the crowds going on. But I always used to get a kick out of if I was dating a girl, and I'm very sinister up there. I would watch it all develop, and because I very much, me, I pride myself in being able to read the room and call the show and stuff. And so I'm constantly with my head on a swivel on stage, and I'd see, somebody investing quite a bit of time and drink money in either my future wife and stuff. And, and I would just let it go, because I was like, well, I know she's coming with me after the show and stuff like that, and you'd see the show would end, she'd be there with their friends, and they'd all be huddling up like, "Okay, it's on, we're gonna go here, we're gonna go to the Wiener Circle and get hot dogs, and then we'll go to this place and that." And I just come over, "Thanks guys for keeping my girl company the whole night and stuff. I appreciate it." And they're like, man, and they just sit and look at their empty wallet.
That's another nugget though, because I think if you have someone you trust that you're with, and she's out there or he's out there, don't let it get to you when they're still out there with their friends, and the opposite sex is going to hit on them. If you're up there singing, don't let it affect your show. I've seen people do that, where it's like, "What the hell?"
Man.
Was it a bass player? I can't remember, but he's just like, "Dude," I'm like, she's not doing anything. She's talking to the dude, but there's not.
You got to be confident enough in yourself that in your relationship that you're safe for a 2-hour show.
Yeah.
But if we push pause and get your notepad ready, this is for the guys or girls out there.
Right.
If you are at a club or at an event and you are interested in somebody in the crowd, take a quick second to just ask them if they're dating anybody in the band. If their answer is yes, move along. Be efficient. Save your time. Save your money.
Nothing to see here.
Hit play again.
Save your money. Save your money.
Yes.
Oh, that's... So, okay, so then...
It's almost like stock tips.
Organically, this thing became a pretty hot club act then, right? Organically, it just kind of happened.
We were drawing a lot of people, and so what was happening then is then people started asking us to play festivals, Street Fest in the summer, and from there, people, younger people, we started playing colleges, like Illinois State was really big for us, and Southern Illinois was really big for us. So college kids would come see us, and then when we'd be at home over the summer, they'd come see us there. And then as younger people would see us at the clubs and they were making their marriage decisions, they were like, "Well, I don't want the big honking 15-piece orchestra that played my parents' wedding. Like, I love these guys." So they'd start asking us to do weddings, and I was like, "Okay, well, we'll do it." And we just no plan. We just kind of figured it out and navigated it over time. And, that's where we really started to refine, like, okay, everybody needs to be on the dance floor. It needs to be danceable. Like, we can't let up. If we play a classic rock song, everybody goes, that stinks. We feel bad. We need to get them back. And so that's where we started to refine that.
So you see that bigger money's coming in for those events, and you wanted to serve that event and make sure. That's when it really started hitting, when suddenly it's not like it's just the bar or the fest, but there's a dance floor involved in a hall.
Yeah. I mean, and very quietly, because, like as a musician, there was always this stigma of, oh, you play weddings and stuff, you know? So like very quietly, we kind of snuck out the back door of the nightclub, so to speak. We still kept a toe in it and stuff, but we started doing private events, and we didn't, make a big deal out of it to our other musician friends. And we quietly just made a very good living doing that without, and we didn't really compromise who we were in terms of, like, we were just kind of doing, people would hire us because they liked what we were doing at these other places. We just kept doing that. So it wasn't like you were selling your soul and doing that. And, from there, we were able to build up a good private market. But then, it was funny, our first corporate gig, entering that market, which has been so great for us, was pretty funny. We were playing after a long Cubs game at the Cubby Bear, and some guy comes up to us, barely able to stand, and he's like, oh, you guys were great. And he's, sticking his hand out. I don't know if I want to touch this guy's hand. He's like, I'm going to take you to Denver. Denver. That's where we're going. We're going to Denver. I got an event there. You'll come. I'm like, okay, buddy, no problem. Here's my card. Call me Monday, right? Because I only lived a few blocks from there. I'm like, I just want to go home and make a grilled cheese and watch SportsCenter. And this guy's like spitting on me and stuff. And this is a Saturday night. And, as a musician, like, once I made the transition to being a full-time musician, like, I stopped setting an alarm years ago. So, I either had a show Sunday night, or I went out with friends Sunday night that were in the industry or whatever. And, I was planning on sleeping until 10 or 11 and then getting up and doing, work and all that. And at 8 a.m., my phone rings, and I'm like, who's calling me? And I pick up the phone, and the caller ID says Chrysler on it. He's like, Dave, this is Kevin Miller from Chrysler. We talked Saturday at the Cubby Bear about this event in Denver that I have.
Less slurry.
I'm like looking at the phone going, he called. Wow. It's really him. And he's like, so what do we have to do to put this together? I'm like, well, first of all, I have to get up and be awake. But that was, our first travel date. And then even rewinding that was our first time traveling. Our first corporate date was for Eli Lilly out of Indianapolis. They were coming to Chicago for like a diabetes care conference that they had for one of their drug lines or something like that. Uh-huh. And, they had come again to the Cubby Bear to see us play. And at the time we were headlining the Cubby Bear for like $500 because my fraternity brother was the booking guy there and stuff. So it was kind of a nice in. And, so they, they're like, well, we need a young band with energy, get people dancing. And he's like, well, what do you need to make it happen? I said, I need $2,500. And they're like, I'm thinking, guys, I'm going to get us 5 times, what we're making. And they're like, okay, do we have paper? Can we write this down and get it signed right now? Like, they couldn't sign the contract fast enough.
Wow.
And then they said they wanted to have a conference call, with me to like plan, because they're like, the band the last 2 years, they've really bored people and didn't come out swinging. I'm like, well, I'm a cocky 24-year-old kid. I'm like, who'd you have?
You're 24.
They're like, we had there's a lot of cover bands that use the something Chicago in the title. They're like, well, we had Chicago, and I was like, okay, which one? And then they're like, and who was the other? Ted, who was it? Huey Lewis and the News.
What?
And I'm like, oh my God, $2,500. I'm like, I misspelled it. I forgot a zero at the end. But that was my first foray and biggest lesson of like, okay, this is a new market for us. Don't go in without doing your research. Don't go in unprepared, because, we were happy to have the show, and we were making 5 times what we were making at a nightclub, but it there could have been, 4X that price, and they would have said yes. And so it was a whole lesson to me in, so from there, the first thing I did was I went out to to Barnes and Noble, and I bought Getting to Yes, which is like the Harvard study, it's the Bible of how to negotiate. And I read that book cover to cover of like learning, like, okay, before you go into negotiation, how do you prepare? What do you need to know? What are the techniques? What are the, there's a big difference in it. Hitting pause again.
This is huge because there are a lot of people that would be interested that are just maybe crossing over into the corporate world that are listening that would love to know this, that have no idea about how to find their price.
So take your pen and paper out.
Get them out, folks.
But what I would say is like there's a big difference. If you're, so let's role play. Say, Dave, what do you charge?
Right. So
you're on the other end. You're buying a band for me. You've
yeah.
got your corporate cup of coffee.
I
there.
do have a very, very corporate cup of coffee. Don't pay attention to the superheroes on it. And listen, I'm looking for something. It's our huge gala. We throw it every year. This coming September, it's going to be big, and we need our band. We need a band for it. Oh yeah. So what do you charge?
6,000.
6,000. Now,
say that to me again.
So there's a big gala. This is really happening. It's a big deal for us. We do it every year. What do you charge?
$6,000. Here's what it includes. It includes 2.5 hours of music over a 3-hour period. We'll be there with the sound system. We'll be there, doing this. There's a whole different. The number's the same that you threw out, and that number is arbitrary, by the way, that I threw out. It has nothing to do with our pricing. Disclaimer.
This is very interesting. Yeah, those are two very different answers with the same number, though. But please.
But yeah. I mean, it's the confidence of knowing, like, if I'm on the other end of that call, if I'm the one buying, and I say to you, Robbie, I want to hire your trio. What do you need?
Go 6,000?
And you go 6,000.
Yeah,
you're toast. Because I know now that that you are negotiable, that you don't know that that's the number for you, and you're not confident in that number.
Wow.
At that point, you're fishing, and so at that point, you're able to go, I only have 2,000. Okay, well, I'll do it. And that's what most musicians do. And it's like, you've got to, I think people do our industry a disservice. We're already in a very flat industry. Mm-hmm. And, I used to do little acoustic gigs back in 1999 and 2000 that would pay $300 for a duo. Well, guess what? It's 2020, people. And guess what those little duo acoustic gigs pay? $300. Meanwhile, gross domestic product and the cost of living has gone up exponentially, but you're supposed to still make a living making the same thing that you did in 1998. And I think one of the things that, there's other market factors that affect that, but one of the things that people can do is take time and understand how to value themselves, and figure out being confident, knowing what you're providing, knowing what your value proposition is. Because if you come in there, fishing and sounding like, I don't know, do you have this? Well, then the answer is no, I don't have this, because you don't even know what you want. And if you're confident and you have a product, and you don't, it doesn't have to be a race for the bottom. I mean, some of the most important clients that we've had, we've sat out a year because we've either said no or because they've tried something else and it hasn't gone well and they've come back to us. So I think like the power of no in our industry is really important because, I think that a lot of people have psychologically, they want to win every negotiation. And, even if you win, you don't always win per se, because it's like, and that's one of the things that, like a book like Getting to Yes will tell you, like you go in to buy a car, beat the guy up as big as you can, because hopefully the next time you're going to buy a car, hopefully that guy's not selling cars anymore. No offense to people that sell cars. But you know what I mean? You're not going to see that guy if you buy the right car for another 7 to 10 years, and he's probably not going to be there. You're not going to, be going to the same place. So that's a one-off transaction. Now, if you're playing at a festival or a club or a corporate event that's a repeat client year after year, you can't beat the people up, to the point where they feel like, I got worked over. I don't feel good about that. You have to learn the finesse of negotiating, and you have to learn, how do I leave people feeling like I got the value that I needed, and that they got the value that they needed and stuff. And then there's strategic times where you have to lose the negotiation, where you just seriously have to look at this and go, it's really important for this person to get a win, but I see a bigger future, if I get a foot in the door. And, in one of our first, was a major hotel chain wound up taking us all over the world, for years, as their band for their corporate conferences. Well, the first time they were coming into Chicago in 2007, and they had selected the wrong national act, like they were playing a gig at one of the major concert halls that this band was playing there the next night, so they got talked into it. And it was the Dan Band from all the Will Ferrell movies, the Total Eclipse of the Heart.
Yeah.
I see the effing look in your eyes, guys. And they're hilarious and they're funny, and he's a super nice guy, but it's a very kitschy, and so it wasn't right for the corporate client. And they booked it anyway, and then realized, like, we're in trouble. Well, the producer happened to see us in Las Vegas at an industry conference showcasing, and she says, I've spent my whole budget. Like, will you come help me at this event? And, we did it for 50 cents on the dollar, what we would normally do, but we kind of saved the night for them because, they still had this band play, and literally Dan, who's in the Priceline commercials and the Wolf, he comes up to me, he goes, I got to show you this, Dave. He he got handed a note that says, get your, ASS off the stage and get that other band on. You're terrible. And we were both cracking up because he was very, he's getting a nice check, so he didn't really care.
Sure.
But from there, we lost that negotiation that night, but we won the game because they were like, we owe you guys, this was a very important event, and you did us a favor, and so, let's go to Cabo San Lucas together, let's go to Puerto Vallarta, let's go to Denver, let's go to all these places. And, so it's, long and short of it is, you have to do your research and know your stuff and be confident, because there's a huge difference, people aren't just, in the event industry, they're not always dealing with, I've got $10,000 for this entertainment. A lot of times they're dealing with, I got $100,000 for this event, so I want to do as many cool things as possible. So maybe the band is 10 grand, but if I can get them for 5, that's 5 I can use for something else. And that's their mentality of, like, now I can bring in a cool magician that juggles peacocks or whatever, so it's a matter of just really knowing your stuff and knowing, how to be confident and coming across that way. I mean, you're providing a service and stuff, and the quicker you're, being desperate, like you have to figure out in life how to keep the lights on, right? And how to keep the heat on and how to keep the bills paid. But at the same time, you have to value yourself for the industry as well. Otherwise it's a race to the bottom, and that's not good for anybody at that point.
And it was such a gift for you to have that business sense, because you're living in a world that most musicians didn't get to live in. Most of us focused so much on the music, and then we're trying to play catch up and become business people after the fact. Where the fact that you were able to do both kind of simultaneously, working on your craft, but then you legitimately lived in the business world. You were able to come to it with a business plan, unlike any I've ever seen. And that's so. I mean, God, that stuff is gold. Everything you just said, you need to write the band book. That, right? Like that would be golden, because nobody would really have the perspective you have. We're all playing catch up to your knowledge. And this is what's interesting then. So then you figure that out because you're using your common sense with negotiation tactics you've obviously seen in the corporate world too, with a little bit of special sauce that you're just adding, from your own experiences. But then, when I looked at an old, I was cleaning out my office, I found an old calendar from before I worked with you. I'm looking at this calendar and I'm seeing we had 3 weddings, we had a private event, the weekends were pretty packed. And I didn't make that kind of money, and I remember the first 2 months working for you.
That's why I couldn't figure out why you made me chase you so long.
I'll tell you, the truth of the matter is, I've told this particular story for a while. because I only equated like record deals with musical success. I didn't think it was possible to do it for a living unless you were like famous. So I was very apprehensive, and then the reputation, I started hearing about the rep too, but I was still scared because of that. But then once I was in, the other thing I noticed is the first, I don't know, I'd done weddings, maybe I was doing 20 a year, I guess, before that. And the first time I led a wedding for your company with the band, I'm looking at the paperwork and I'm looking at the forms and I'm looking at the way you guys came at the wedding market, before I even did a corporate gig. And I thought, holy crap, this is how you do it. Because, there's a questionnaire. You're really getting everything from the client. And all I thought of is, had I known this 2 years ago, I would have made at least double what I made, before I met this guy. People, I'm telling you, if you're in a band, you're probably going to your wedding and what do you like? Here's a list and that's it. But this guy has it so nailed down to where it's specific. I mean, by the time we're getting there to the day of their wedding, we know as much about their wedding as they do, as the client does. So I want to let the audience know that.
I think first of all, you have to approach it from, you want your clients to be able to be guests at their own wedding.
Yeah.
They should not have any responsibility that night other than get in the dress, get in the tux, say I do, kiss each other, and then come have a party. Yeah. You don't want them directing traffic or anything. So to do that, you need advanced preparation. And, I read a book called The E-Myth, before E meant electronic, but it's a book by Michael Gerber, and it's the whole philosophy of like, if you build something, build it so you can replicate it and scale it 100 times, and it's about creating systems and processes that are repeatable. And you look at a company like a McDonald's, and like, why can McDonald's taste the same all across the country, and you could argue that overseas it doesn't taste the same, but theoretically over the world and stuff, and a bunch of 16-year-old kids run it. Well, it's like, if you set up your business so that your people run the business, you're dead, because you need to set it up so that your systems run the business and your people run the systems. If you set it up where your people run the business, if you start losing people and you have no systems, then you're going to have to, it's like trying to change the tire on a bus while you're going down the highway. It's very hard, to do that while everything's rolling. And so like, replicating systems and duplicating and coming up with like, well, at a wedding, like, there's variations at each wedding, but there's a ton of stuff that happens every time.
Right.
And it's just knowing that and giving the clients that white glove service and the ease of knowing like, hey, part of what you're getting when you're getting the groups in the Maggie Speaks musical family is you're buying insurance. There's no do-overs and once in a lifetime events. And so, and if you make the wrong choice, you're not going to find out till halfway through your wedding, and then it's too late because you're not going to do it again next week and get a chance to correct it. So I think, for the people shopping out there, of like when you're thinking about buying, it doesn't really matter what you're thinking about buying, whether you're getting a carpenter to fix your stairs or your remodel your kitchen, or you're buying a band or whatever. It's the Amazon Prime generation right now, right? Everybody does their research, looks at reviews, scans to the lowest price, and selects. And it's like, that's not really always what you want to do. Like, if you're buying a pair of swim trunks, sure, do that. That's great. But if you're buying a service from somebody, and, cheaper doesn't always mean better. Like, and most expensive doesn't always mean better. It's more finding out truly about what do you value, who do you trust. Trust matters. And, when you're trying to find, the right band for your event, like any band, that's worth their salt is going to come and play Uptown Funk right now. And it's like, some of the long-term partnerships that we've had with our, clients that you and I have traveled around the world with, they don't change because we change for them each year. We find out, what's your theme? Let's customize it. Let's come out and do a different show, which they probably wouldn't get if they kept switching bands, because they'd play the same,
I never thought of it that way.
You know what I mean? They don't know to change. Like, they don't know what we played last year, so they're going to come out and play Uptown Funk and blurred lines and,
Right.
and staying alive, all that kind of stuff. But for us, it's like, hey, we're tracking, like, we did this for you last year. Let's do something different. And let's build the trust so that not only are we performing at your event, but like on my end, I look at it as I'm producing your show, like, and you're getting that producer mentality of like, I care much more than just stepping on stage, doing our 3 hours and stepping off and hoping the dance floor is filled. And I think people see that. You want to connect on a one-to-one basis. And, I found that like little tricks to the traders, like, just try and find people's pain points and make them go away. Like when you talk to people on the other end, ask questions so you can find out, what are you worried about? What's your nightmare? What's the biggest challenge and stuff like that? And then you could speak to how you can address it. Too many people are like, well, I have a band, we'll play for 2 hours, we'll play fun songs, we'll show up, and great. And you haven't, great, stick my square peg in your round hole, as opposed to going, hey, what shape is your hole? So that comes out sounding bad, but what shape is your hole? And let me build something to put it. Check, please. That's like the Janet Jackson wardrobe malfunction right there.
But
folks.
The thing is, and I think, and I can attest to this because I did this before I started working with you, is I had a product, we liked the product, we knew they liked the product, we went in. If there were any X factors, bad or good, we kind of rolled through it and we got out of it like, whew, okay, well, it went well, that other thing. Whereas I feel like, the way we're telling people to bring out their pads, you must have had, at the very least, a mental internal pad at every show. It seems like you were kind of evolving and finding these things when you first entered like a wedding market or a corporate market, and I don't think bands do that. I didn't. We went in with our show, did the best we could do, and then walked out and, it went well. But you always knew like, oh, boy, too bad it didn't. Oh, well, the show went well. We did it,
Yeah, I mean, I think number one, I think it's shaking hands up and down the line.
Yeah.
From an early age, you got to know that you never know when someone's going to resurface in a position of power someplace.
Super smart, yes.
So don't dismiss anybody, number one. Number two, we would go on all these big events as performers, and I would watch what was going on, and I would try and like keep my eyes open and head on a swivel and see like, what's holding things up, what's bottlenecking things, what are things that I would do different, like, and then I would start going, why would you make that decision? Like, this is really simple. You should do X, Y, and Z, and why are you doing A, B, and C? In my head, I'm sitting there, and so like I feel like I'd kind of developed some producer chops with that. Also, started my mathematical background, started looking at, not formal algorithms, so to speak, but like, we do a lot of stuff on like what tempos are songs and how many beats per minute. And like, I watch a lot of bands that it's just a race to faster, quicker, stronger, more energy, and that's not the case. It's like, you're not running a sprint most of the time. It's a marathon. So it's like, you got to shoot out of the gate pretty high, get them excited. Then you got to bring them down a little bit because you got to bring them up again.
Yeah.
And it's analyzing that kind of stuff and analyzing what's going on at events and providing solutions to people, like saying like, hey, I noticed, like one of the things at our galas and stuff, it's like, people think more time, I need more time. Well, it's like, at a gala where you've gotten there at 5:30 and you've sat through, an hour and a half cocktail and then a 2.5 hour dinner and paddle raise and auction, like, your band shouldn't take a break after that. They should go, do 2 straight hours. Don't do 2.5 over 3, because at a half hour, I don't care if you're Jesus Christ, they're going home. It doesn't matter. Like, you'll have a few people, but that last set is really painful. And I'd rather talk to the people involved and saying, hey, the biggest thing with your gala is we have to leave people excited, like they wanted more. We left on a high note, because then they're going to come back next year, and that's going to make, and at the end of the gala, the whole idea is, it doesn't matter, like they're not like the people organizing the gala, you could play great and you should play great. That's the barrier to entry, but they got to raise money. And how do you raise money at a gala? By having people at the gala that are excited about it and that tell their friends next year, I had a great time at this. So we have to provide the value for them to feel good about the $250 a plate and the $5,000 paddle raise and all that. At the end of it, we're the cherry on the sundae to say, like, wow, and the band was awesome, and I danced and for 2 hours, and then I went home, and the next morning I woke up and I called Ted next door and said, you got to come to this gala with me the next day. And that's where fundraising starts to snowball, and that's really what their the producer's job is. They have to raise money, and if the band can help facilitate that, great, but it takes, most people will come into that just looking at, like, I got a gig tonight.
Right.
Got to get through the gig, gonna go have fun, but got to get through the gig, and not looking at it like, okay, what's our role here, So.
That's the difference, though, between looking for high-end success in a band and just being a band. That's the main difference.
Yeah, it's chess versus checkers.
Perfectly put, yeah. I'm going to get into a little bit of just what you're doing now and how you build shows nowadays, and then we're going to get into our wonderful story because that's going to freak everyone out. First, we'll take the eye blink. This is your eye blink, everybody. Pause for a sec. There you go. That was eye blink for you guys, just a second for you guys, and then more time for us to, we build a whole other company model.
We only blinked one eye. We didn't have time for both. It's not efficient.
So now here you are years later, and let's get into what happened. And people, just go to, where do we direct them? MaggieSpeaks.com?
New website, MaggieSpeaks.com.
Okay, great. And then Magnificent Events. There's
MagEvents.com, M-A-G, events with an S.com.
Get online and check all that out because you're going to see what he's talking about, and you'll be able to know that, oh, this guy's not just talking. You're going to see so much. Go to the sites and you'll see cool stuff. And now here we are, and this thing takes shape more than, obviously the business model, the business plan is unlike most other bands, and then you start doing something really unique. All of a sudden you're booked so much that you actually had to kind of franchise in a way. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think what the evolution of it is, Maggie Speaks started in 98, and we started getting up to, we were doing 200 shows a year, and we were, I started Magnificent Events in 2000, which is my booking entity. It's talent buying, booking agency, event producing, and really the way that happened was, we were doing pretty well at the nightclubs and things like that, and nightclub owners would come up to me, it's a good night tonight, how do I get more bands like you? And you should hire this guy or that guy, and then I blurted out, well, I could book your club for you. And they're like, oh, wait, would you do that? And I'm like, well, yeah. And so I became a booking agent and a booking guy, and I had places like 115 Bourbon Street, for a number of years that I would book, and then festivals would come to me, and and then on the corporate side, people would call me and go, like, we had your band last year, but I just need a piano player this year. And I'm like, well, call this guy, call that guy. And after a while, I was like, wait a minute, people want this information that I have, because again, it's shaking hands up and down the line.
Yeah.
And it's also being like having a keen eye for talent and stuff. I mean, knowing like who the players are in the industry and stuff, and who sounds good and who's professional and all that kind of stuff. And so I started, being a resource, which has grown into, sort of being a power broker in the industry, that like, big companies come to me now because they know like any talent that I send them will be well vetted, and that I'll get a deal done really quickly for them, and they won't have to, jerk around. It's like a EF Hutton talks and people listen kind of thing. Like you get to the point where your opinion is valued and you're respected and trusted. And that's what I've really tried to do with that. So, basically, rolling back, Magnificent Event, Maggie Speaks started in 1997. Our first gig was in June of 98. We started doing like 200 shows a year. I was getting literally 20, calls per Saturday. And, like in the old baseball analogy, if you go 3 for 10, you're a Hall of Famer, right? Hitting 300. Well, it's certainly not really hard to go 1 for 20.
Yeah.
So we were booked every weekend with weddings, and, we kind of shook up that market because we were at times we were a 3-piece band, and then we were a 4-piece, and then we had a female or a 5-piece. And the only other thing in the wedding market was these big orchestras and stuff. And we came along at the right time, right sized, especially when the economy collapsed. We actually grew during that time, which was I'm watching people struggle and lose their houses and stuff. And we're thriving because we're right sized for it at that same time. Like people were still getting married, but we were smaller, so we had and the corporate side was great during that time because corporations were still doing business, but AIG lays off 4,000 people and then has Jimmy Buffett the next night. You got executives coming out on CNN covering their face with their jacket because they're ashamed and embarrassed. Well, Maggie Speaks isn't going to land you on CNN if you have a party with them and stuff. So we started getting some of that kind of work during that time. But, really what was happening was at that time, we didn't have a lot of people in our space that were doing what we were doing, which was younger guys doing modern music in a smaller, compact configuration that was packing dance floors. And so I would say to, Blake and Sean, our drummer and bass player, that I said, we got to clone ourselves. It's funny. I'm like, no, I'm serious. And so finally, we went out and we hired, at the time, 4 additional people, and we basically hired them to replicate, under our guidance, the Maggie Speaks show. And we started booking them as an alternative because before I was like, well, I'd have to turn people to a competitor. And it was like, well, after, supply, simple economics, supply and demand. Yeah. There's a lot of demand. If you don't have the supply, create more supply to meet the demand. And I'd rather maintain the business within our entities than give it to, you give it to somebody else. And if they do a good job, they're never coming back to you. They're going to stick with what they like. So It's like create more supply. And that kept ringing true to me. So we started Spoken For in 2006. And they quickly got up to 100 plus shows within a year or so. And I mean, I think I only promised the guys, I was like, look, I think I could get you at least 12 shows. And I very much
Wow.
We've known each other a long time. I'm very much try and be a under promise over deliver guy because It's very easy to get sucked up in this industry with people that tell you they're going to do great things for you and then they don't have the follow through. And then when Final Say, which is your band, came along, the first gig was booked without a band. This was, Spoken For was started in 2006. And towards the end of that, Eric Ferguson from Eric and Kathy at the Mix, the morning show, his wife called and said, hey, is your band available? Because we would play all kinds of music from the Mix and stuff at the time in the 2000s, the Matchbox 20s and your Goo Goo Dolls and all that stuff. And she said, I want you to play Eric's surprise 40th. And I'm thinking, this is going to be great. He's the #1 morning drive DJ. He'll talk about it for a week, on the radio. It'll be great press and stuff. And I'm like, what's the date? And she's like, January. I'm like, okay, great, January. That's usually a slower month, that'll be great. 26. And I look at the calendar. I'm like, son of a, both Spoken For and Maggie Speaks are booked. And I just blurted out, I'm like, we could do it. And she's like, you're available? I said, yeah, our band Final Say is, our third band's available. Oh, okay, that sounds
third
good.
Band.
So I called up Blake and Sean, and I'm like, we have to start a third band. And they're like, we just started a second band. I'm like, yeah, but we have a gig for the third band, for Eric Ferguson's.
Quick side note, now it's Eric in the Morning with Melissa and Whip, and I had Melissa from the Mix on the show. She was a guest, and she still remembers that party.
What happened to Kathy?
Kathy just decided to bow out.
Wow.
No more Kathy now.
Mazel.
Yeah.
Good things.
But anyway, she still remembers the party, still remembers, and knows that Maggie Speaks very well.
Yeah,
Funny.
so we, it was just, I feel like I've made a career out of answering the phone and going, I can do that, and hang up the phone and going, how the hell am I going to do that?
Yeah.
But, and that's again, looping back to if you're passionate about something, okay, when I hung up the phone, I had to figure it out and it worked out well. And, that probably a decent segue into how we found each other into.
Oh, great listeners.
Here we
go, folks. You can start it. I'll finish
Robbie had
it,
a restraining order against me. So
So interesting.
Should I tee it up? And then
you got to
can
you
jump
got to
in?
tee it up with how it ended up on your desk. That,
Yes.
you know,
So, you know,
I didn't even know all that till very recently.
as a booking agent, you know, I would get tons of press kits sent to me. You know, people and I booked. You know, when I was booking 115 Bourbon Street, I think I booked that place for like 4 or 5 years and stuff. You know, and I had a bunch of other clubs that I booked. So people wanted to get into places that I booked, so they'd send me, you know, their press kits. And you know, now you just send an email with links to YouTube and stuff. But before, you know, there were different iterations of what was in a press kit. You know, you'd have a photo and a set list, and you'd have, you know, some sort of demonstration, whether it was a CD with audio files on it, and then people would send DVDs and stuff like that. And I remember, you know, I get this big bulky package, and it's sitting on my. The other funny thing, it was sitting on my desk in my cubicle. Like I had a home office, and it was funny because I always said I wanted to get out of the cubicle, and then the first thing that I did when I had my home office was I went to this, like, you know, home, you know, this office, you know, we sell old office furniture. And what did I do? I bought a cubicle. I'm like, what? I got home. I'm like, wait a minute, what did I just do? But it was modular. It was good. So I'm in my cubicle at home that I purchased for myself,
to get away from cubicles.
Right. And, you know, I just got off a phone call. We didn't get some gig, and I was upset, and I hit the counter, and I pound, and I go, darn it. And I was really upset, and I hear this ka-chunk, and I'm like, what the heck is that? And I look over, and there's this bulky package. I'm like, what the? I open it up. It's got a VHS tape in it, which is like the equivalent at the time to, like, if somebody was like, you need to do math? Here's an abacus.
It wasn't vintage, was it?
I was
No.
like, and I'm like, gosh darn it, fine, I'm going to listen to this. Like, who sends me this? I got to see this. This is going to give me a laugh or whatever. And so, like, I'm like, okay, but I don't have a VCR, like, out or anything. Like, I'm like, oh, I think there's still one in the basement from the old. So I'm, like, going in the basement. I'm rummaging. I'm throwing stuff. My wife's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm finding a VCR. She's like, for what? I'm like, I don't know. I can't tell you yet, you know. So I hook it into the TV and hit the button, and it turned on. Luckily, it wasn't all burned out. And I put this tape in, and there's this band playing at this club. I recognized it was like Finky's or something in Highland, Indiana, or someplace in Indiana. And, you know, it's a big band, and I felt like, I've seen this before. I've seen this kind of band. I don't really know that I have a place for them and stuff because it's not really a club thing, I don't think, and blah, blah, blah. So I'm forming all these opinions in the first, which, hit pause.
Yeah.
Here's the next thing. Capture them in the first 20 seconds, right? Because, like, luckily I kept watching on because, you know, I'm watching this instrumental intro going for like a minute, and then all of a sudden I see this guy in a hat. And I'm like, there's a guy in a hat. He's just like moving around, and he's dancing, so he's not going to be able to sing because he's too busy dancing. And then this guy opens his mouth, looking back on when I'm like, okay, you've got my attention now, sir. And I'm like, holy crap, this guy can sing, and this guy can perform, and he's got it. Like, I need this guy. Like this guy's awesome, you know, and the rest of the band was fine.
Yeah,
like
fine.
they're really solid players and stuff. But it was like, you know, there was the shining star and stuff, and I was like, okay, I got to figure out how, you know. So I called the number on it and spoke to Jesse, and super nice guy. We've become friends and stuff like that. And, you know, I started booking you guys at, you know, with an ulterior motive, of course. I booked you a couple shows at Bourbon Street and stuff, and it was a nice break because it was like kind of soul music and more, you know, from the hard R&B.
I give those guys credit. They're the bravest group I've ever been in because they didn't know any better. They were older, so they had no egos. I think, by the way, when we're going to talk a little bit about that, the ego thing, I think the fact that I started out with dudes that were past those years prevented me from getting a crazy ego.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I see egos a lot in our industry, you know. But all right, folks, here we go.
So
this is
anyway,
I
we
gotta
book them at 115 Bourbon Street.
Yeah.
And I'm chasing Robbie. I'm going, you got to come work for me. I know, I'm doing my thing. I got my timepiece thing, and we're working. And it's going, no, you got to come work for me. You got to come work for me. No, I don't want to come work for you. So then, we at one of the anniversary parties, we book at Bourbon Street, Richard Street, that what used to be in the Temptations for from 1971 to 1993, 22-year run in the
famous
Temps.
Recordings. Man.
Papa was a Rolling Stone. He won the Grammy for Heavenly. Lots of famous songs and stuff. Richard was a very dear friend of mine, which we'll kind of get into and stuff. And was like, I called him my West Coast dad, and very dear friend. Very surreal for a 14-year-old white kid from Northbrook to like be in the inner circle of the Temptations, as he grew up. And, so I needed an opening act for Richard's version of the Temptations at Bourbon Street for an anniversary. I'm like, well, Timepiece would be perfect. So I hire Timepiece, and they always do a bit in their show where you get to sing My Girl with them, and I was like, I made sure, like, Robbie, I'm going to get you up there to sing My Girl, and you're like, man, it's a dream come true for me. I'd love to be up there with them and stuff. And, so Robbie gets up there and he kills My Girl and everything and has a great time hanging with Richard and everything and getting to talk shop with him. And, and then after that, I think we invited you out to a Cubby Bear show where you jumped on stage to sing Let's Get It On. And I remember, you're being the control freak, you're walking up kind of cold, and I can't even remember if we had in-ear monitors back then or not or whatever. And I'm like, okay, so here's what's going to happen. You're going to hear this, and this is going to happen. Then you're going to come in with, I've been really... And you're like, you just looked at me stone cold. You're like, Dave, shut up. I got this. Don't... And like... And you go out there and kill it, and it just reminds me of, like, I got so much tutelage and advice from Richard from the Temps over the years. He's like, Dave, one time, Dennis Edwards, we were in Detroit, and we did this whole show, and we were killing it, and everything was great. Everybody loved us, and Dennis was dating Aretha Franklin and brought her up for the last song. Nobody remembered we played that night. It was over. It was the stupidest thing he could have done. And I was like, that's how I felt. I'm like, I don't want to go back on and sing... Slide by the Goo Goo Dolls after Robbie sang Marvin Gaye.
So
then we start becoming friends, right? And I finally pestered you enough that you're like, fine, I'm going to come over to your house. You drove out to Plainfield at the time. I'm going to come over to your house. We'll sit down and talk once and for all and just figure out, let me hear what you really got to say, and I'll tell you what I really got to say, and we'll figure out yes or no or whatever, so that you'll stop bugging.
So let me jump in here and then go back. How many years?
Pass the ball to you.
How many years before? What do you think that famous? Well, I'm a kid. I went to a Temptations concert, folks. And by the way, I just told this on an NPR show, and the crowd could not believe it. They had an audience. Nobody could believe this story. It's just nuts.
1989.
Jeez. So I go to see the Temptations. And I see this My Girl moment, and they bring people up from the crowd, and this young white kid in like a white tracksuit gets up there, and he sang My Girl with the Temptations. And folks, this kid did moves. He did the actual Temptations choreography, and I thought, oh my God, that's how you do it. Someday I want to get up there and I want to sing My Girl with a Temptation or the Temptations, and I'm going to do what that kid did. I'm going to do the moves and see if they move with me. And then cut to years later, Timepiece gets to open up for Richard Street, a former Temptation, and then I didn't even know how. I was just so pleased that somebody allowed me to get up there. I didn't even know you had anything to do with it. But I get up there, and then I do what I remembered that kid doing. I did some Temptations moves, and then they did it with me. There's a video of it somewhere, and I was just so pleased with myself. And then to later find out.
Well, so then you come over to my house. I'm like, well, hey, let's talk in my office and stuff. We go up into my office.
The final meeting.
Yes. This is the is he going to say yes or not kind of thing. And I get into we get into the office. You're looking around. I got some memorabilia on the walls. You look up and you see, I had all these pictures that when I love art. And so I had drawn pictures of the Temptations and got them to autograph. And there was an autographed copy of a record. And then there's two photos, like Polaroid-ish kind of photos in there from this concert with you know, in 1989, and you look up at it and you go, that was you?
He was the kid in the tracksuit.
I'm like, what are you talking about? You're like, that's you on stage there? I'm like, yeah, I was on stage. That was Holiday Star Theater, 1989. I was singing My Girl with the Temptations. He goes, I was in the crowd that night watching you, you know, in 1989. This is, 18 years prior. We've never met, you know.
What are the odds, though, that I wanted so badly to do what that kid did, and then when I finally got to do it, I only got to do it because that kid booked me on a show. That's just, you can't write that story.
No, it
mind-blowing.
Very, and I remember, I was hunkering down planning for like an hour and a half sales pitch to you. We walk into my office, like, that's you? And I'm like, yeah, that was me with the Temps when I was 14. He goes, I'm in.
Pretty much did.
And like in typical, here's your press pause, get this nugget out for you, take notes, kids. But like, if you've ever seen Moneyball with Brad Pitt, there's a funny scene where he's making a trade with Cleveland, and he hangs up the phone, and he goes, great, thanks, click. And Jonah Hill goes, you just hung up on him. He goes, as soon as you get the answer you want, hang up the phone. He goes, what? He goes, don't talk yourself out of it. Just hang up the phone. You got the answer you wanted. So it was like, great, you're in. I got nothing more to say to you.
I mean,
you start tomorrow.
It's either the craziest, I don't know what the universe did to put that together, or the most elaborate hoax to get me in that you started.
My Photoshop skills are excellent.
You started,
like I had the grainy Zapruder film picture. And
you started
like
at
that.
14, just like, okay, this is going to serve me later.
It was a long con.
But it's fun because I wanted to finish it off with this line of thought and go back to the whole Temptation and your love of Motown, our shared love of Motown. There's a thing that, now that the audience has been able to hear, how you're able to apply this kind of cognitive shine on the business to really make it work, whereas it's hard for most people because they're in a band and we love doing this, and sometimes they forget the social fun aspect of being in a band, and we're all just hanging out, and you forget that no, we have to coexist as business partners, and we have to make a plan so that we're trying to make a living with this, and still have fun when you're up there. You've figured that out, but there's something that really beckons back to your love of Motown. There's something that really goes back to that, because the Motown machine, as we both know, they had this like spit shine and this polish on the performers, and there was an it factor. And I feel like every time I hear you give advice to a singer, or every time you're trying to build a show, I see all of the business sense and all of the intelligence that you've gathered being a performer and a businessman. But then I see this thing. You have this sensibility that goes back to the perfection they were trying to put on stage back then. And I feel like there's a part of that I see you using in today's world. And it's interesting. I don't know if you realize it, but I feel like he's doing something that nobody knows how to do right now,
Well, I think the interesting thing is that whether it's sports or music or Motown, I think there's a natural thing in our industry that you tend to, like, your ears and eyes perk up when somebody that's a crazy good performer, I want to do what that guy, and it's like the people sometimes that you should be listening to, like there was a hitting coach, Charlie Lau, that taught George Brett how to hit, and he was a White Sox hitting coach for, back in the 80s. Like, Charlie Lau couldn't hit his way out of a paper bag, but he could teach it. Some of the best coaches in history, Bobby Knight was a great coach at Indiana. Like, he played basketball. He wasn't great. He was a role player, but he could teach it. And it's the same thing, like, I always say, we've got 5 bands now, and all you guys could sing me into the ground, in my opinion, and stuff in terms of sheer talent. But it's like, I can see, things down the road, or see things that other people don't necessarily see. And it's like, so it's not necessarily like, well, can I do all the runs that you can? Absolutely not. I would fall flat on my face. But I could see a show develop, and I could give advice to somebody And the best thing that people can do is like look for those people in your life that aren't like, well, I can do this and you can't. Well, that doesn't matter, but they might be able to see a blind spot for you that you don't even know you have, and that's not a blind spot to them. So if that makes some sense with it, I mean, I think that's kind of, where, seeing so many events and always watching them and watching what does this producer do and what is that, and just being a student all 22 years of my career with this, I feel like, by osmosis, I've seen, almost everything there is to see, and then I can identify it pretty quickly and help, correct course and help people with it. So.
It almost seems like the rule for the up-and-coming singers or people, I don't care how long we've been doing it, if you try to work with somebody and raise your success game, I think if they meet, if somebody meets a Dave Calzaretta, if somebody meets another person who's really just killing it, I think before you start to judge the advice or any kind of constructive criticism, the first thing they need to look at is, oh, wait a minute, where are they and where am I? And if you want to get where they are, then obviously you want to listen to what they have to say. And I think that's the biggest sign. Yeah. If you want to because people want to get egotistical about it and don't you tell me what I can do, But if you stop and just say, well, wait, he's got this thing and I don't have that, then find out why. Because something that a Dave Calzaretta says or some of these other folks in the industry, some of the stuff they're going to tell you is obviously what got them there. And I think that's what they need to look at instead of, kind of the simple, take ego out of the game.
Yeah, I mean, well, you look at like a guy like Berry Gordy, who's obviously a huge music mogul, maybe one of the most successful of all time. And Berry wrote songs and stuff, but Berry couldn't sing, Berry couldn't play, but like, if all those but he knew how to surround himself with super talented people and super talented artists. And for the most part, the ones that shut up and listened to him went on to hugely successful careers and stuff because they listened to the Yoda, the guru at the top of the mountain that maybe they had way more talent with, but he knew how to bring it out of them, and he knew how to put them in a position to succeed.
What I like is that in the midst of everything, your love of the music and the singing hasn't gone away. Now you and I got to do that one show with Theo Peoples, who, I didn't catch it till you said it. I knew it, but I didn't realize it. He's the only guy that's been in both the Four Tops and the Temptations, Yeah. And when you and I, thanks for putting me on that gig with you, but when you and I went on that gig and we sang with him, I got to see just joyful Dave. Which I see often. I'm blessed that when I get to do some shows with you, I see the moments where it's like, this guy's just singing right now. And I'm glad that after all you've done for so many people and yourself, that you're able to still sometimes just leave it and be a singer. I've seen you have these moments, and sometimes it's our biggest corporate moments. I think we're in San Diego, and I've just seen you have these moments. I saw you have this moment at the end of Hey Jude that I hadn't quite seen in a while. Like, no, this dude's he's a singer right now. This dude's he's not about the bottom line right now, and it's so nice to see that you can still have that. It makes me happy for you.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, blessed to do that, and it's fun, Theo being the only guy to start out, and he took Richard's place in the Temptations, which was very ironic for me because I've always kind of had a temptation in my life, and very strange that I used to be the kid at the shows when I would get up on stage with them when I was 14. Then the next time I'd go and they'd call me up again, and this is before cell phones. They just knew when they came to Chicago that I'd be there, and they'd call me up, and I was like a novelty act for them. I'm the only white kid in the whole crowd and stuff, and and they just, remained a part of my life. I mean, Richard was a dear friend, used to stay at my house, bounce my kids on his leg. He was Uncle Richard to them. And the funny thing that I was trying to explain to my kids when they were like 9 and 10, they're like, who is this guy? And I'm like, well, he's very famous, like the Temptations. I don't know who that is. My Girl? No, I don't know who that is. Well, they sang for kings and queens all over the world. No, I don't know who that is. Thriller in Manila, they were invited by Muhammad Ali to sing Ain't Too Proud to Beg in the dressing room to psych him up. And I'm like, think. I was like, okay. And I swallowed and I said, this is going to be pathetic, but I'm going to say it. I said, Richard is good friends with Nicole Richie's dad, Lionel. They're like, no way. And they're texting all their friends. Some guy that knows Nicole Richie's dad is over.
That did it.
It's been reduced to this.
And
but
I thank you for that, man, because you allowed me to share in that. You know, you and I are going to have some Korean food after we get done here.
Sun Oak.
Yeah, that's
on
your
Lincoln.
spot. That is your spot.
I love that place.
And one time you picked Richard up for a show from the airport, and man, that was heaven. That was heaven for me. I could never think. It was one of the best
You should
moments
thank
of my life.
Janice more than me for that, because I did call you. I'm like, Robbie, what are you doing right now? Janice and I are about to go. I'm like, you need to come to Chosun.
Oh, that's
and
right.
You're like, I gotta go with Molly and Janice, and I'm like,
Forgot about
you're
that.
about to have dinner with Richard Street, and you turned him out. You're like, I gotta go.
Janice
she understood.
Janice gave me the out. That's right.
She's a
that's
keeper.
right. She's a keeper. It was, I mean, talking Motown stories with that guy. It was amazing, man. And
it's fun.
And I think the key to everything is you have to do the business thing, but you still have to be on stage. And I think that's really hard. I had to figure that out too. Luckily enough, you made me a band leader, and stuff happens, whether it's with the client or with your camp, or I lost my mom the day of a gig, and moving through this particular type of job, having to be on stage when stuff is messing with you mentally, like you lost your dad, who was such a beautiful man, and I was impressed by, you were able to just stay in the saddle, but I was also impressed by the way you did something I didn't do when I started to see my mom's ending days. You started looking into your own adjustment period well before. You were so adjusted when I talked to you like a week before that awesome dude left us. You were talking like a dude that had, it had been maybe a year in, and you'd already figured out the mental place that you figured out where to be usually takes a lot of us a year after the fact. And it was really interesting how you kind of had a good grip on where to be mentally. I was impressed by that.
Well, look, I mean, you're never going to prepare, big events in life, you find out you're having a kid, right? You got 9 months runway, prepare. And so you can do as much as you can, and then this kid pops out and you're like, whoa, I'm not ready, or whatever. And it's the same thing when you lose a parent, in the sense of like, my dad was sick for a couple of years. He went on dialysis 2 years ago for his kidneys, and then got a very aggressive prostate cancer the last year. And so, it was during this time that, like, my dad chose to fight, and he really wanted to fight through it. And like, in early September of 2019, like his legs kind of gave out on him, and he fell, and he couldn't, I ran over, stop what I was doing. I ran over there. I handicap-proofed the house and stuff, got ramps, got him a wheelchair, got him a walker, all this stuff. And that was, really the start of the last 4 months was the decline, where like he would still have to go to dialysis 3 days a week, because if he stopped, he would be dead in 72 hours, like without that. And he was getting radiation and cancer treatments and stuff like that. And so he wanted to keep fighting, but he couldn't. Like, the only times he left the house was to go back and forth to dialysis in the ambulance that we set up for him. And for me, watching that, it was so inspiring, because the only reason he wanted to stay around, like, all he did was he wanted to just be around his family and keep talking. So it's like, well, what can I do? It's like, well, I could do what he did for me the whole life. I could just go be there with him. And so I was seeing him 5 to 7 days a week. Luckily, he lives a mile and a half from me. And, I would drive over, even on some days, if it was just 5 minutes, to pop in and give him a kiss and say, Daddy, I love you, and all that stuff. But we had a lot of deep conversations, and we were very much on the same page of like, hey, you're sticking around because you want to talk to me. So the best thing that I can do is be available. And I put a lot of things on hold that I'll never regret doing. Spent the time with him. We had great conversations. Nothing was left unsaid. We expressed our love for each other, left it all out on the table, had some really magical times together. And I think that allowed me to feel like I had closure. I don't have any regrets. I miss him terribly, but at the same time, like, I don't ever live with like, oh, the only thing that I ever regret since he's passed over the last month, and if this is as bad as it gets, it's pretty good. It's like, I wish I could have just asked Dad where he put this. You know, like I'm not sitting there pondering the meaning of life. It's just like he had this pen that I really liked and I can't find it. Where do you think he put it? So, you know, I mean, that's
but not did he love me.
Right, exactly.
Right.
So it's a little more surface
That's
level.
doable. That's doable.
But I think it transitions into something that I think would be really, you know, good for us to talk about, and that's like in our industry is mental health. And it's something that over the last, you know, it's been a long struggle, like, you know, and being open about it, you know, like I've struggled with depression my whole life. And it's tough in our industry, right? Because what's our job when you boil it down, like you peel back the layers of the onion, and you get down to the root. You know, we're singers, we're performers, we're producers, all this stuff. But at the end of it, what are we? We're joy givers, right? We create joy for people. Like in music, you know, you're sad. What do you do? Well, I'll listen to music. It'll cheer me up, or I'll relate to it. You're happy. I want to celebrate. Let's go listen to some music and all that stuff. Well, we've messed that up for ourselves, right?
Right.
You know, because you know, over the last 22 years, I've performed 4,000 shows, and it's like, you know, when I get in the car, I'm like, no music, talk radio, this or that, or silence or whatever. And so I think it's, you know, I think it's hard because I think, you know, as a performer, you're putting yourself out to be judged by people, and it's not always going to be pretty, you know, and that sometimes it's justified and sometimes it's just people that wish they could trade places with you, and it's a defense mechanism, and, you know, you suck, you're terrible, get off. And now, especially with social media and like keyboard warriors getting home, and it takes nothing to hide behind your keyboard and fire off. I remember we played at a festival in Sugar Grove, and we had a really nice crowd, and everybody had a good time, and there were fireworks and stuff, and, you know, big crowd, and we come home, and my kids and I are on the computer, and I popped on my Facebook page, and I get this angry message from the, you know, if you ever come to my town, I'll kill you, and my kids are like, why are they saying that, Daddy? And I'm like, some people, man, they're like, you know, and you're just like, so like sometimes those shots can, you know, take a toll on you and stuff. But I think, you know, also in our business, you're going up on stage, you're putting yourself out there. So like there's so many, we're such perfectionists, like it's got to be perfect, and it's, you know, you're your harshest critic and stuff like that. And, you know, and then being somebody that's in charge of the business, I would always constantly, you know, take on the burden with 5 bands and 25 to 40 musicians that are like, man, you know, I got to have enough work this month, or I can't, you know, pay the mortgage or the car payment or whatever. And I would take that so seriously that it, you know, was creating for me this pressure. And, you know, and I finally, you know, it was starting to get bigger than me, you know, like I never like to let people down, and I never like to, you know, tell people I can't deliver or whatever. And it was getting to the point where I was like, man, maybe if I just go away, you know, like serious thoughts happening to the point where I'm like, man, you know, so I started to address it through, you know, through therapy and things like that, and through reading, and then, you know, ultimately just trying to get in a better headspace, because it's so many times, like, you know, people like a Robin Williams or an Anthony Bourdain, or, you know, you'll see them, you know, commit suicide or something, and you're like, oh, that guy had everything. You know, and it has nothing to do with money, fame, or adoration. It has to do with, we're all just people that get up, you know, put our shoes on, you know, one shoe at a time and stuff, and, you know, are real people. We might have a cooler job than the guy that's, you know,
right,
digging a ditch or whatever, but at the same time, we're real people with real feelings. And if constantly we're relied on to be the ones that are giving the joy, where do we go when we need to seek joy and stuff? And a lot of times we've ruined a lot of the avenues, traditional avenues, because we provide it for people that it's not there for us. So it's like trying to find yourself and trying to find, like, I love cooking and I love drawing and painting. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I just try, and, you know, I find a passion in it and stuff. And I just really think that, like, you know, the world could be a better place if, you know, when you're walking down a busy street, like in a place like Chicago, if you just stop and think about, you know, like, everybody's got pain, right? And, you know, you've got stuff that triggers you and that's you're thinking about all the time, you know, like, oh, am I 5 pounds to this, you know, and you stop and think about, like, every single person that I'm walking by in this busy city, I wonder what their pain is, you know, like, and give them a break, you know, like, don't, like so many times I was at the gym the other day, and some guys like Key Fob didn't work at LA Fitness, and he just let the two girls at the front desk have it. Like every time I come in here, and I just watched the look on their face, and he walked away, and I'm like, I think you guys are doing a real good job, because I don't think you invented this card swiping system, and that isn't really working, and I'm really sorry that happened to you. It's like people just need to take a step back, give each other a break. Don't get on social media and start criticizing people. It's like I'm a huge Bears fan, and like if a player doesn't play well, like you're tempted to get on your Twitter or your Facebook and be like, this guy stinks. And then I started thinking about it, and I'm like, that guy's got to go home, and he's got a wife and kids and stuff like that. And yeah, he makes a ton of money, but that, like it still hurts when people do that. It's like, so what are you accomplishing by saying like, hey, this guy on the Bears stinks, or this guy at the show stinks? It's like, like it's just a guy who's got feelings and stuff. Like, let him.
You're right.
Let him be.
People need to take a breath, and not a breath to let the thoughts fester, but an actual breath. And I think when you're about to say, if you think something about someone who's in front of you, we all kind of take a breath, and then sometimes we don't go in to just be rude to somebody. We decide, no, that's not a good idea. I'm going to keep this thought. But with social media, the breath is gone. They think it goes right to their fingers. And what they need to learn to do is take a breath, because you might find that you're not going to angrily, jump on and start using your thumbs to say nasty stuff. It's a nasty time. But I do like the fact that you're able to be so, as well adjusted as anybody can be, because it's true. After a while, people look at us like, you're on stage all the time. It's awesome. It's just as unawesome too as anything else that they're going through, because we all have the same stuff,
Yeah, I mean, we're blessed to be able to make music for a living and stuff like that. But like anything, at times it can be a job. At times you would do it for free, and at times you would be like, you can't pay me enough to do that, all that kind of stuff. But at the end of it, it's like we're all human beings and stuff, and we all just need to like take a step back, give each other a break, be kind to people, and like just try and reframe, because it's like life's too short, man. You look the last week and last month, and you see someone like a Kobe Bryant and his daughter, gone in a second, and it's like nothing's promised to anybody, and it's like a random act of kindness can really change somebody's day.
Well, I'll tell you, man, these last few months, especially, with your dad stuff, but with maybe the last year, you've talked to me about some of your kind of self-analysis and then self-improvement kind of thing. And what's impressive about that is I'm able to, I don't know if you guys are as aware, I was trying to hit it home earlier on, but when I talk about the great job that I have, and where most of my real gigs, my livelihood, it comes from this man, from his company, from him selecting me, and to know that. The one thing that always impressed me is every couple of years, you're talking about, okay, we're up here, we're doing really well, and now the competition is coming up. Now, how do we get even further ahead? And you're always improving the product some way, shape, or form. Every couple of years, there's this new thing that's happening in this company, and you've never stopped. I love the fact that you don't sit still for that. But now to see that after really killing this thing professionally, you're starting to do it personally with yourself, with your own mental well-being, with your quality of life, and for you personally, I'm pleased to see you doing that,
Yeah, I mean, I just think in life, like, you can never be done working on yourself, and you can never be done, there's always work to do, whether,
You agree?
See, the dog thinks
agrees.
so, too. He's like, I'm working over here. I'm eating this apple.
The first time you've chimed in the whole time. Keep it quiet.
But in all reality, whether it's working or whether it's family or anything like that, you just got to really keep constantly trying to improve, and if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards and stuff. And I think the other thing that someone said to me one time is like, like, you can't change people. Only they can change themselves. Now, you can talk to them and you can encourage them to, you can plant a seed for them to want to change. But I think a lot of people waste a lot of energy trying to change people. And it's like, it's not going to happen. Like, they can only make the decision themselves. The other thing that people make a huge mistake on in life is, like, I learned this, I was president of my fraternity in college and had 100+ guys, and my fraternity dad, who was very wise and president before me said, he goes, here's the deal. You got a third of the guys in the house that'll do 2/3 of the work. You got another third that do the other third. And then you got a third that don't do crap. He goes, the mistake that most people make is they focus on that third that's not doing anything and try and get them to do something. He goes, that's a lost cause. Look at the guys in the middle. Look at the guys, the 2/3 of the guys doing a third of the work. See if you can push them to the next level. And I think, when you're building a business or building a circle of friends, it's like, lop off the bottom rung, like, be quick to act and make decisions of, like, if somebody is not meeting expectations and stuff, maybe it's not the right fit, and like be candid about that right away. And then I think you and I have talked about it. I think, whether it was, I used to be a partner in some restaurants and stuff like that. And like, the first day when, something spilled on the floor, it was really important to me to be the first guy out there with a mop. And the guys ran out, oh, what are you doing? You're the boss. I said, it doesn't matter. I'm not above doing this. And I think, like, through Maggie Speaks and Spoken For and Final Say, like, one of the things that I feel very prideful in is that, like, I don't think I ever asked you guys to do something that I haven't done 100 times myself or am not still willing to do, because that's not, like, that's not a good leader or a good boss. Like,
I remind my camp of that, yeah.
Because there's times that it sucks for all of us. It's grueling, like a 3-hour straight show or this, like the reason we've traveled around the world with that one particular client, I come to find out in 2009 in the Bahamas, they wanted us to play for 3 straight hours as a 5-piece band. And I was the only one in the entire country that said yes. Everybody else said, can't do it, gotta have a break, gotta have this, and I just said, yeah, I'm gonna be tired on the beach in the Bahamas the next day. I'll do it. Like, but I mean, then that's the thing, it's like, yeah, we've all done that stuff. And I'm, like, I think it's really important to show the people that you work with that you're in the trenches with them and stuff.
Yeah, so. Man. Well, folks, I would tell Dave to, like, drop a last nugget of wisdom, but if you guys really want something great, just rewind and keep listening and take notes. This is like that. I'm reading that book, The Alchemist, and I was told that if you read that book, like, you get something out of it every time you read it. I think if people listen to this episode, they're going to get something different every time. They're going to have to keep replaying this one, and you have to write a book. Well, you're a gift to the industry. You've given a safe haven to talented people. You've kind of shown a lot of folks like me how to really do this. I was an original artist who did gigs, and I thought, oh man, well, if I go corporate, I'll never be able to do that, and I'll never be able to be a songwriter again. And instead, you've given me the ability to constantly be able to go back and enjoy that pool as a creator, because you've given me a base to live in, and I've learned so much from you. I've learned so much from your company. I'm glad that we're friends, and but it's been an amazing journey, man. You're one of the most impressive individuals I've met in my life, and I'm honored to know you. Seriously.
In the words of the immortal Zara Zaharieva, Rabbi, I love you, man.
Well, folks, there it is. Go to MaggieSpeaks.com. Go to Mag Events. MaggieSpeaks.com. Am I right?
MaggieSpeaks.com, magevents.com, MAG events with an S.
You will find you will see all the wonderful things. And now, it's a great commercial too. If you guys need the stuff, you need the services, you're bound to meet one of us now. Oh, I heard you guys on the podcast. Now you're doing my wedding. So anyway, you love them now. You've heard the story. That's David Calzaretta. And folks, there you go. There you have it. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in for Robbie Celestin and
Dave Calzaretta.
Have a great month. Have a great week. Have a great day. Go out and find your smile. And there you go. For the masses forever.
All right.
That was great, man.
Welcome to my life so far. You'd think by now I'd be a star. I may be long-winded, but hey, there's just so much I have to say. Maybe lick your lips when you're hungry. Maybe drop your head when you're sorry. Maybe shake a bit when you're worried. That's